Okay, let's go. Number 1. Tulsa Race Massacre Mass Graves. In May 1921, a white mob attacked the Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Greenwood was known as Black Wall Street. It was one of the wealthiest black communities in the United States. The attack lasted roughly 18 hours. When it ended, more than 35 blocks were destroyed. Estimates of the death toll range from 75 to 300. The exact number is unknown because many bodies were never recovered. For decades, survivors and descendants insisted that mass graves existed. They described trucks hauling bodies at night. They pointed to specific locations: Oaklawn Cemetery, New Block Park, the Arkansas River. Official records denied it. The city of Tulsa did not acknowledge mass graves. Historians debated whether the survivors' accounts were reliable. In 1999, the Oklahoma legislature established the Tulsa Race Riot Commission. The commission's mandate was to investigate the massacre and locate possible burial sites. Ground-penetrating radar surveys began in 2019. The surveys identified anomalies consistent with mass graves at Oaklawn Cemetery. In 2020, excavation began. The first test excavation revealed a trench containing multiple coffins stacked in layers. The coffins were plain pine boxes, consistent with mass burial. Some contained remains with gunshot wounds. The bones showed evidence of violent trauma. Forensic analysis confirmed that the remains dated to the early 20th century. The discovery validated what survivors had said for 99 years. The mass graves existed. The bodies were there. The city had buried the dead quickly, without proper documentation, and moved on. The excavation continues. Each burial is documented, analyzed, and when possible, identified. The work is slow. The ground does not give up its dead easily. Tulsa's mass grave is not unique. A century earlier, another American city buried its dead in unmarked ground and forgot where they were. Number 2. African Burial Ground. In 1991, construction workers preparing to build a federal office tower in Lower Manhattan hit something unexpected about 20 feet below street level. Coffins. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. The General Services Administration had commissioned an archaeological survey, but the survey assumed any colonial-era cemetery would be shallow and small. It was neither. The African Burial Ground was a cemetery for enslaved and free Africans during the 17th and 18th centuries. It covered roughly 6.6 acres. Historians knew it had existed. Maps from the 1750s showed its approximate location, but the city had built over it, paved it, and forgotten exactly where it was. For 200 years, thousands of people walked over the cemetery without knowing it was there. The excavation revealed more than 400 burials. The coffins were stacked. Some graves contained multiple individuals. The burial density was extreme. Archaeologists found shrouds, beads, coins, shells, buttons, and other grave goods. Many of the coffins were heart-shaped, a West African tradition. Some individuals were buried with their heads facing east. Others were buried in Christian orientation. The skeletal remains told a brutal story. Many individuals showed signs of severe physical stress. Vertebrae were compressed. Bones showed evidence of heavy labor. Muscle attachment sites were enlarged, indicating repetitive strain. Some skeletons had healed fractures. Others had infections. Childhood malnutrition was common. Life expectancy was low. The discovery triggered immediate controversy. The African American community demanded that the excavation stop and that the remains be treated with respect. Protesters argued that the construction project was desecrating sacred ground. The GSA initially planned to continue building. Public pressure forced a halt. In 1993, the site was designated a National Historic Landmark. Construction was moved to a different location. The remains were studied, then reinterred in 2003 during a ceremony attended by thousands. The site is now a national monument. A memorial and visitor center occupy the location. The African Burial Ground is not unique. The ground holds what institutions erase. Sometimes it holds entire crews, frozen at their stations. Number 3. H.L. Hunley Submarine Crew. On February 17, 1864, the H.L. Hunley became the first submarine in history to sink an enemy warship. The target was the USS Housatonic, a Union sloop of war blockading Charleston Harbor. The Hunley approached underwater, rammed a spar torpedo into the Housatonic's hull, and detonated it. The Housatonic sank in minutes. The Hunley never returned. For 131 years, the Hunley's location was unknown. Divers searched Charleston Harbor repeatedly. The wreck was finally located in 1995, buried under silt roughly 1,000 feet from where the Housatonic went down. In 2000, the submarine was raised. It was intact. The crew was still inside. 8 men crewed the Hunley. They sat on a bench, facing forward, turning a hand crank connected to the propeller. The crank was their only means of propulsion. The submarine had no engine. The crew powered it manually. When the Hunley was raised, all 8 skeletons were found at their stations. They had not moved. They had not tried to escape. The discovery raised immediate questions. Why didn't the crew escape? The Hunley had 2 hatches. Both could be opened from inside. The crew had time. The Housatonic sank slowly. The Hunley did not flood immediately. Yet the crew stayed at their posts. Forensic analysis provided answers. The crew's bones showed no signs of drowning. Their lungs had not filled with water. Instead, the skeletons showed evidence of blast trauma. The explosion that sank the Housatonic also killed the Hunley crew. The shock wave traveled through the water and through the submarine's iron hull. It ruptured internal organs without breaking bones. The crew died instantly. The discovery rewrote naval history. The Hunley did not sink because of mechanical failure or crew error. It sank because the weapon it carried was too powerful. The crew succeeded in their mission and died in the same moment. The Hunley is now displayed at the Warren Lash Conservation Center in North Charleston. The crew remains were buried with military honors in 2004. Thousands attended the funeral. The Hunley crew died in 1864. The next discovery pushes human presence in the Americas back 23,000 years. Number 4. White Sands Footprints. In 2009, a park ranger at White Sands National Park in New Mexico noticed something unusual in the gypsum sand. Footprints. Not modern footprints, ancient ones. The prints were fossilized, preserved in layers of hardened sediment. They appeared after rainstorms and disappeared when the sand dried. The ranger reported the discovery. Archaeologists arrived. The footprints were human. They were also mammoth, giant ground sloth, dire wolf, and camel. The prints overlapped. Humans had walked the same paths as megafauna. The question was when. Dating footprints is difficult. Bone and charcoal can be radiocarbon dated. Footprints cannot. The team needed datable material embedded in the same sediment layers as the prints. They found it. Seeds, Ruppia serosa, an aquatic plant, grew in the ancient lake that once covered White Sands. The seeds were embedded in the sediment layers between footprint horizons. The seeds could be radiocarbon dated. The results were shocking. The footprints were 21,000 to 23,000 years old. The dates were verified by multiple labs using multiple methods. Radiocarbon dating, optically stimulated luminescence, stratigraphic analysis. All methods agreed. The footprints were made during the last glacial maximum when ice sheets covered much of North America. The discovery contradicted the Clovis first model. Clovis culture appeared roughly 13,000 years ago. For decades, Clovis was considered the earliest human presence in the Americas. White Sands pushed that date back 10,000 years. Humans were in New Mexico during the Ice Age. They coexisted with megafauna. They walked beside mammoths. The footprints also revealed behavior. Some prints show adults walking with children. Others show teenagers running. One trackway shows a woman or adolescent carrying a toddler on one hip, then setting the child down. The toddler's prints appear beside the adults. The prints are not just evidence of presence. They are evidence of life. More than 400 individual prints have been documented. The number grows each year. The site covers roughly 80,000 acres. Each rainstorm exposes new prints, and each dry period erodes them. The team races to document what the weather reveals before it destroys the evidence. The footprints are 23,000 years old. The next discovery is 11,500 years old and involves 2 infants buried with red ochre and stone tools. Number 5. Upward Sun River infants. In 2006, archaeologists excavating a site in central Alaska uncovered a fire pit. Beneath the fire pit, they found a burial. 2 infants, placed together in a shallow grave. The burial was deliberate. The infants were positioned carefully. Red ochre covered their bodies. Stone tools and projectile points surrounded them. The burial was 11,500 years old. The site is called Upward Sun River. It sits on a bluff overlooking the Tanana River. The location was a seasonal camp. People returned to it repeatedly over centuries. The fire pit above the burial was used for cooking. The people who used the fire pit did not know the infants were buried beneath it. Or they did, and the burial was intentional placement under a hearth, a practice documented in other ancient cultures. The infants were not twins. DNA analysis revealed they were both female, but they were not closely related. One infant was a late-term fetus or newborn. The other was roughly 6 weeks old. Both died around the same time. The cause of death is unknown. No trauma is visible on the bones. Infant mortality was high in the Pleistocene. Burial was not. The burial is significant because it is rare. Infant burials from this period are uncommon in North America. The Upward Sun River infants are among the oldest known burials in Alaska. The grave goods are also significant. The stone tools are high quality. The projectile points are finely made. The red ochre is imported. The nearest source is more than 62 miles away. The burial was not casual. It was planned. DNA analysis provided additional insights. The infants' genomes were sequenced. They belonged to a population ancestral to modern Native Americans. Their lineage split from other Native American groups roughly 20,000 years ago. The Upward Sun River infants represent a previously unknown branch of early American populations. The burial also reveals care. The infants were placed together. Their bodies were prepared. Ochre was applied. Tools were included. Someone mourned them. Someone buried them with intention. The burial is not just archaeological data. It is evidence of grief. The site was excavated between 2006 and 2013. The remains and artifacts are curated at the University of Alaska Museum of the North. The site itself has been backfilled and protected. The infants were buried 11,500 years ago. The next burial is roughly the same age and involves a child buried with more than 100 stone tools. Number 6. Anzick Clovis Burial. In 1968, construction workers were building a house near Wilsall, Montana. They were excavating the foundation when they hit a rock shelter. Inside the shelter, they found bones. Human bones. The workers also found stone tools. More than 100 of them. The tools were Clovis points, among the finest ever discovered. The bones belonged to a child. The child was roughly 18 months old at death. The burial was deliberate. The body had been placed in the rock shelter and covered with red ochre. The stone tools were placed with the body. The tools were not utilitarian. They were ceremonial. Many had never been used. They were made specifically for the burial. The discovery was reported to archaeologists, but the remains were not immediately studied. The Anzick family, who owned the property, kept the bones and artifacts. For decades, the burial was known but not analyzed. In 2003, the family donated the remains to the Montana Historical Society. DNA analysis began in 2013. The results were groundbreaking. The Anzick child's genome was sequenced. It was the first ancient genome recovered from the Americas. The child belonged to the Clovis culture, dated to roughly 12,800 years ago. The DNA showed that the child was directly ancestral to modern Native Americans. The Anzick child's lineage is present in indigenous populations from Canada to Chile. The burial also revealed Clovis behavior. The child was not discarded. The child was honored. The burial included more than 100 stone tools, many of them masterworks. The tools represent hundreds of hours of labor. The red ochre was imported. The burial was not expedient. It was elaborate. The discovery confirmed what many archaeologists suspected. Clovis people were not just hunters. They were not nomadic bands without social structure. They buried their dead with care. They created art. They had ritual. The Anzick burial is evidence of culture, not just subsistence. The remains were repatriated under NAGPRA in 2014. A coalition of tribes from across the Americas claimed the child as an ancestor. The remains were reburied in a private ceremony in June 2014. The location is undisclosed. Tribal representatives, archaeologists, and the Anzick family attended. The child was buried twice, once 12,800 years ago, once in 2014, both times with ceremony, both times with care. The Anzick Clovis burial is Clovis. The next site is post-Clovis and involves a massacre, not a burial. Number 7. Sand Creek Massacre Site. On November 29, 1864, roughly 675 U.S. cavalry troops attacked a Cheyenne and Arapaho camp at Sand Creek in southeastern Colorado. The camp was peaceful. The tribes were camped under federal protection. They had been promised safety. Colonel John Chivington led the attack. His orders were to kill and scalp all Indians, making no distinction between combatants and non-combatants. The attack lasted roughly 6 hours. Estimates of the dead range from 150 to 200. Most were women, children, and elderly. The survivors described mutilation. Bodies were scalped, dismembered, and displayed. Chivington's troops returned to Denver and exhibited the scalps in a theater. The massacre was celebrated as a victory. Survivors testified before Congress. Their accounts were detailed. They described where people were killed, where they tried to hide, where bodies fell. The testimony was recorded. Then, it was ignored. For more than a century, the exact location of the massacre was disputed. The site was on private land. It was plowed, grazed, and altered. Landmarks described by survivors had eroded or disappeared. In 1998, the National Park Service began a systematic search. The goal was to locate the massacre site and establish it as a National Historic Site. The search used historical documents, survivor testimony, and archaeology. Ground-penetrating radar, metal detectors, and test excavations were employed. The team found what survivors had described: bullet casings, uniform buttons, artillery fragments. The artifacts were concentrated in specific areas that matched survivor accounts. The team also found human remains, bone fragments, teeth. The remains showed evidence of violent trauma, gunshot wounds, blunt force injuries. The forensic evidence matched the testimony. The discovery did not reveal new facts. The facts were already known. Survivors had testified. Congress had investigated. The massacre was documented. What the archaeology did was confirm the testimony. It gave physical form to oral history. It transformed survivor accounts into material evidence that could not be dismissed. The site was designated Sand Creek Massacre National Historic Site in 2007. The location is now protected. The National Park Service manages it in consultation with Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes. The site is not a tourist destination. It is a place of mourning. Sand Creek does not discover new facts. It confirms known facts. It gives physical form to testimony. It transforms oral history into material evidence that institutions cannot ignore. Sand Creek is not the only battlefield where archaeology has reconstructed violence. The next site involves another famous battle, but the focus is forensic. Number 8. Little Bighorn Battlefield. On June 25, 1876, the 7th Cavalry Regiment, led by Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer, attacked a Lakota, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho camp along the Little Bighorn River in Montana. The attack failed. Custer and roughly 268 soldiers were killed. The battle lasted less than an hour. For more than a century, the battle was studied through military records, survivor accounts, and maps. The U.S. Army version emphasized Custer's tactical decisions. Native accounts emphasized the size and coordination of the defending force. The battlefield itself was treated as a memorial, not a crime scene. In 1983, a wildfire burned across the Little Bighorn battlefield. The fire cleared vegetation and exposed the ground. Archaeologists arrived. They treated the battlefield as a forensic site. Metal detectors located bullet casings, uniform buttons, and weapon fragments. Each artifact was mapped. The team recorded more than 5,000 individual items. The artifacts told a different story than the official accounts. Bullet casings showed that native forces were better armed than previously believed. Many carried repeating rifles. The cavalry carried single-shot Springfield carbines. The native forces had superior firepower. The casings also showed movement patterns. The team could track where individuals fought, where they fell, where they retreated. Human remains were also analyzed. Bones showed evidence of gunshot wounds, blunt force trauma, and post-mortem mutilation. The forensic analysis confirmed native accounts. The soldiers were overwhelmed quickly. Many were killed in the initial minutes. Others were hunted down as they tried to escape. The battle was not a prolonged fight. It was a rout. The archaeology also revealed something unexpected. Some soldiers were killed by their own weapons. Bullet casings and bone trauma showed friendly fire. In the chaos, soldiers shot each other. The discovery contradicted the heroic narrative. The battle was not a last stand. It was a massacre. The battlefield is now managed as an archaeological site. New techniques continue to reveal details. Ground-penetrating radar, LiDAR, advanced ballistic analysis. Each tool adds detail. The battlefield is no longer just a memorial. It is a laboratory. The ground is evidence. The artifacts are witnesses. The bones are testimony. Little Bighorn Battlefield is a battlefield. The next site is a camp where people fought not warriors, but winter. Number 9. Donner Party Alder Creek Camp. In the winter of 1846 to 1847, a group of American emigrants became trapped by snow in the Sierra Nevada. The group, known as the Donner Party, had attempted to take a shortcut to California. The shortcut failed. By November, they were stranded. Roughly 87 people were trapped in 2 camps. One camp was at Donner Lake. The other was at Alder Creek, roughly 6 miles away. The winter was brutal. Snow accumulated to depths of about 20 feet. The emigrants ran out of food. They ate their oxen, then their horses, then their dogs. Then they ate leather, boots, harnesses, anything organic. Some resorted to cannibalism. Roughly 40 people died. The survivors were rescued in the spring. The Donner Party became infamous. The story was sensationalized. Newspapers focused on cannibalism. The survivors were reluctant to discuss what happened. Some denied cannibalism entirely. Others admitted it but minimized it. The exact details were unclear. The camps were abandoned. The locations were known, but the sites were not excavated. In the 1980s and 1990s, archaeologists began systematic excavations at both camps. The Alder Creek camp was particularly well preserved. The site was remote. It had not been disturbed by development. The team found hearths, trash pits, and structural remains. They also found bones. The bones were analyzed. Most were animal bones. Cattle, horses, dogs. The bones showed butchery marks. They had been broken open to extract marrow. Some bones were burned. Others were boiled. The pattern was consistent with extreme food scarcity. Human bones were also found. Not many. A few fragments. The bones showed cut marks consistent with defleshing. The evidence confirmed cannibalism, but the scale was smaller than sensationalized accounts suggested. Cannibalism occurred, but it was not the primary survival strategy. Most people died of starvation, exposure, and disease, not violence. The archaeology also revealed resilience. The emigrants built shelters. They maintained fires. They organized rescue attempts. Some members of the party walked out through the snow to get help. The survivors did not passively wait to die. They fought. The site is now protected. The artifacts are curated at the U.S. Forest Service and the University of Montana. The location is not publicized. The Forest Service wants to prevent looting. Looting is not hypothetical. The next discovery involves tens of thousands of Native American artifacts stolen from graves and sacred sites. Number 10. Looted artifacts of Utah tribes. In 2021, federal agents raided a private collection in rural Utah. The collection belonged to a man who had spent decades looting archaeological sites. The raid recovered more than 40,000 artifacts. Most were Native American. Pottery, baskets, projectile points, ceremonial objects, human remains. The artifacts came from hundreds of sites across the Four Corners region. Many were taken from graves. Others were taken from cliff dwellings, rock shelters, and ceremonial sites. The looting was systematic. The collector kept detailed records, maps, photographs, notebooks describing where each item was found. The records were evidence of decades of theft. Looting is not rare. It is common. Archaeological sites across the American West are targeted. Looters use metal detectors, shovels, and GPS. They sell artifacts online, at auctions, and through private dealers. The market is lucrative. A single intact pot can sell for thousands of dollars. A burial with grave goods can be worth tens of thousands. The damage is irreversible. When a site is looted, context is destroyed. Archaeologists cannot determine the age of artifacts without context. They cannot reconstruct behavior. They cannot understand relationships between objects. Looting does not just steal objects. It erases history. The Utah case was unusual because the artifacts were recovered. Most looted artifacts are never found. They disappear into private collections. They are sold and resold. They are displayed in homes, not museums. The knowledge they contain is lost. The recovered artifacts were analyzed. Many came from ancestral Puebloan sites. Some were more than 1,000 years old. The artifacts were matched to specific sites using the looters' records. The sites were revisited. Archaeologists documented what remained. In most cases, the sites were destroyed. Trenches, pits, scattered debris. The looter had excavated entire structures. The artifacts were repatriated under NAGPRA. Multiple tribes claimed them. The Hopi tribe, the Pueblo of Zuni, the Navajo Nation, the Ute Indian tribe. The artifacts were divided among claimants. Some were reburied. Others were curated in tribal museums. The human remains were reburied in private ceremonies. The case resulted in criminal charges. The looter was convicted. The sentence was probation. No jail time. The legal penalties for looting are minimal. The cultural damage is permanent. Looting continues. Every year, thousands of sites are damaged or destroyed. The artifacts are sold. The history is erased. Archaeology is a race against looters, developers, and time. The ground holds what institutions erase. Tulsa's mass graves. The African burial ground's 400 coffins. The Hunley's 8 skeletons. White Sand's 23,000-year-old footprints. Upward Sun River's infants. Anzick's child. Sand Creek's bullet casings. Little Bighorn's bone fractures. Donner Party's butchered bones. Utah's 40,000 stolen artifacts. The past is not gone. It is buried. Archaeology is the process of uncovering what institutions erase, what time obscures, what power conceals. The ground does not forget. It waits. If you want more videos that will unsettle you, subscribe. If this one made you question reality, leave a like, and comment where you're watching from.